like it's a crisis that in evolution, we use all this brain capacity to create a simulated self that lives in a simulated life. Because I think if the organism can do all that, what could the liberated brain actually do? This is what we call horizons of biological intelligence. Like if you could have, now the mind doesn't have to mind the organism. And so I think we're at the cusp of this, because I think in education as a culture, we've had to educate people, like you said, to just store information. Where else could it go? We didn't have computers. But for me, it's like now that computers can store, retrieve, and translate and explain and show information, if we could get rid of this, all this time the brain spends simulating, twice simulating the environment, what could the brain, like, what did it really evolve to do? Thank you so much for having this conversation with me. So I want to talk about levels of pre-reflective experience. See, I changed that I've had, and then I'll just share them, and then we'll talk about maybe where the research could go for this. And I want, you said you wanted to title your paper "Why Consciousness is Not a Thing." I had this dream, or I had this like image today of I'm going to be on a panel with Michael Levin, which is a big deal for me, and I wanted to title my presentation "Why I Don't Believe in Your Model of Consciousness," right? So, which I'm not going to do, but let's just talk about these. So we know, for example, people, and I've had experience, I used to be on an all-state basketball team, where like you do something and then you don't know you did it. So flow in sports. So, Joe Montana's would always report, like, I don't even know what happened, right? So, and these extreme sports, okay. So we know and we accept that the body can be so perceptually acute and have capacities without no one there. There's no one in there driving. So we know this about sports. All right. So then we also know that people report, everybody does this. You drive on a familiar road and all of a sudden you're there and you don't know how you got there. Now, sometimes it's because you're preoccupied with something else. Like I always use the example of trying to figure out the seating at a wedding, right? And you're like, oh, she can't. And then you're driving. Okay. So now you're running two tracks, right? You have a self that's thinking over here in your Jamboard, and you have the pre-reflective organism, the creature that's driving. Okay. So this isn't, everybody agrees with this, right? Nobody actually thinks about it. Very few people actually go there. I think this is very important. All right. Now, one time so then when I was at college, I was a pre-med at college, and I was struggling with physics because I didn't really have the math to do well in physics. And one time I remember, this is before we had computers, right? And I'm sitting in the stacks and I'm trying to do this homework, and I fell asleep. And then I got up like at 2 o'clock in the morning. I went to my dorm and I just went to sleep. And I woke up and I knew the answer. And I thought, this is really interesting. Now, lots of people describe this. And you can ask Zach now. I actually, over time, have hacked this. Like if I'm trying to work on something, I'm like, why use, Messenger? Why use the 14 bits of information here and do? I just go to sleep. There's a certain intentional state, and I just go to sleep. I call them my elves, and I'm like, work on it. I do this all the time. I can wake up and write like 25 pages and stuff like that. Okay. Nobody really, lots of people report that. It's not interesting to researchers, right? Okay. Now, one time I was driving, and I was in like the spiritual, I have a very porous self. So like sometimes I'm 30,000 feet looking at myself down there. Okay. So one time I'm driving back from an emergency that I had with one of my horses, and it's a country road, and I'm in my truck. And I would call it limbic system overwhelm. This is a lot of times you depersonalize it, right? So myself, which this is not seem weird to me, because I think the self and where it's located is a simulation, right? We mostly think it's here, but we can dream in third person. So sometimes it's like down there. Sometimes, they do these experiments where you project yourself on another body, or you project okay, so the simulation of the self can be in different three-dimensional space. But anyways, the important thing is I'm 30,000 feet up in the air, and I'm looking at myself driving this simulation. But that's not interesting to me. What's interesting to me is how did that know how to drive? Like, this is pretty complicated. It could like put the lights on. And also it reminded me in your work, when that was happening to me, I was like, well, if this is going to happen to me a lot, I should figure out how to pack myself back into my body, because it might be. So I had read a book by Oliver Sacks where he says, if you're having a hallucination, cut, right? So I was trying to find my steering wheel, and then that brought me back in. Okay. So now the last one is, after that happened, with the truck, I mean, I had gone through this period where I would go into work, and I mean, I didn't sleep for 13 days. So that was this kind of crazy thing that was it. But I was in work, and I ran a very large architectural design build firm, and I was responsible for taking the blueprints and turning them into proposals and job costing. So I'd have the calculator here and the blueprint there. And I went behind myself, and I was not there. And I was like, fuck, the body mind can do math and design and contracts. Now, this is what's fascinating to me, that this. So where I go with this is like, I think it's a crisis that in evolution, we use all this brain capacity to create a simulated self that lives in a simulated life. Because I think if the organism can do all that, what could the liberated brain actually do? And this is what we call horizons of biological intelligence. Like, if you could hack, now the mind doesn't have to mind the organism. And so I think we're at the cusp of this, because I think in education as a culture, we've had to educate people, like you said, to just store information. Where else could it go? We didn't have computers. But for me, it's like, now that computers can store, retrieve, and translate and explain and show information, if we could get rid of this, all this time the brain spends simulating, twice simulating the environment, what could the brain, like, what did it really evolve to do? And that's what really excites me. I want you to just like ping off of that or riff off of that.
Thank you so much. This is really, really fascinating. So I'll try to do a bit like the reverse engineering in all your stories. So first of all, I would like to say that you can't really do that, the driving, if you're not an experienced driver.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Same thing with, I did that for 30 years. Yes, the schema is, okay. Yeah. Thank you. Great point.
That's super important. So this means that you kind of like encoded that type of functioning and information, and it's just like it's just running. It's just doing. Actually, incidentally, I also do my best thinking when I run. So I go running. I don't even pay attention to running itself. Just like I just run, and then I just came up with solutions. So I don't sleep. I run. But I think it's something similar. In the case that you turn off the hyper-reflexive thing, and what is happening, I think, going back to this like cognitive bias, so we we tend to define knowledge as the capacity to, accumulate or process information. But I think that's just part of the story. Going back to the light and darkness contrast, I think
Mhm.
a very important part of who we are is the things that we need to forget and ignore, or just like push in the background because you already know how to do it. And they call this phenomenon in the experimental psychology called the somatosensory attenuation. So you basically need to dampen down certain information to actually be able to focus on the other. And the correct feeling of knowledge come from the right balance that you can do between the two, because you need to, be back if
Mhm.
something is happening in your road.
Yes,
You
yes.
need to be, and the opposite in the depersonalization, sometimes you just need to be able to disengage, because otherwise you feel all the time like a third person perspective on yourself, and then you don't feel there anymore. You don't feel real or
Yes.
present. You feel like an object, like they say, like feel like an automaton, like a machine. You do things on automatic pilot. You just like do them, and you see yourself doing them, but you're not really there to do them, to do the things. But I think there is one important insight here, which I think should be stressed, is that even if it's you who is like behind and you kind of like don't see the you doing,
Mhm.
there is still the I as a thread between the two.
Mhm.
There is no breaking down. So there is like, and this is the pre-reflective self. Exactly
Ah,
this one. Yeah. This is the invisible transparent bridge. So if you have a bridge which is transparent, doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. You just like walk on it, it's transparent, but you walk,
right.
yeah. And this sense of like mindness that you have between the several version of the I experience that you can have,
Yeah.
it's there all the time because it's embedded in the organism. I mean, you need to keep track of
Yes.
yourself, otherwise you can't really survive. And if anything jeopardizes our survival, definitely, come back.
Yeah.
So I think that's super important. So I think we should focus on this balance between ignoring and knowing, and between forgetting and focusing. And I think the right balance between the two systems that gives you the feeling of like being in control of
Yeah.
whatever actions we perform into the world. And I think highly successful people in the flow, these are people that been through that experience a lot.
Yeah.
Hence, they can afford to put it in the background, forget about it, even though it's kind of they're not process it as an object of an experience,
Yeah.
but they are fully subjectively present there as subject of an experience. That's a full-fledged subjective experience. Yeah, you're just like
Mhm.
fully there. And sometimes I think this is obviously a speculation on my behalf, but when I'm doing this running and I'm this like experience of the flow, I wonder if I'm not reaching something very close for whatever animals have, or very young
Yes.
babies, where you just like turn off the cognitive thing, and
Yeah.
you just experience like a full deep presence.
Yeah.
And that can be
So,
blissful. Yeah.
so a couple of things. I mean, I think I was fortunate because then I started teaching about consciousness after I left my normal job career. And, I met people who would have experiences like that. And they're like, oh, the real self is like astral projecting. And I always trusted the body. Like the body is the experiential center, I would say.
Mm.
And but I'll tell you one other experience that I had that I would say is the best experience of my life. And that was I was skiing in the Sierra Nevadas. And it was my first time skiing. And I went with my boyfriend, and I ended up not, I didn't really know how to ski. And I was kind of skiing through the woods, and he was up in the mountains, and a big snowstorm came, covered all my tracks, and I got lost. So I knew I had to go up a mountain because the cabin was at the edge of a lake, and I thought I'd go up the mountain, I'd see the lake. So I duck waddled all the way up through the storm to the top of the mountain. I looked down and there was no lake. I was on the wrong side of the mountain. And I had this kind of like epileptic fit. I lay down on the ground and I flopped around like a flounder. And then when I came to, I was just like you said, I didn't have cognitive, reflective, and but I was like an animal. I was going to make it to the pond, and it was just a physical, perceptual thing. And I was like an animal. It was like I was inhabiting the body that drove the truck. So instead of checking out, I was for the first time inside that, experiencing, perceiving. It was like, yes, it was cold, but I wasn't cold. Yes, it was hard, but I wasn't having a hard time. And it was profoundly motivating because of this. It's not just because I wanted to live, because that's a scary thing. It was because of the challenge in front of me. And that was an adventure, like, so
Yeah, that's
yeah,
really really powerful and really beautiful. And obviously it's not the same level, but I have very similar experience when I go to new places. So in new cities that I don't know, I rarely need to look at the map, or just you've been there, and then go back, and you don't. As soon as I start thinking, I'm getting lost. So all I have to do is just like follow whatever my muscle in my body says. It's just like, as I said, like an animal, and say there is something that tells me I've been here. So this looks something familiar, and it's just like you. But it works. It works only, as you said, if you don't go very far ahead, because that's
yeah,
meaning kind of like distances yourself, and then you go into the cognitive. It's just like you literally need to be very present at very single step that you're doing, and it's
yeah,
about that presence and nothing else, and it's fully present in that moment. And I think you're right. I think that's something that we share with animals, and if that's the case, as you said, it's extremely beautiful. I'm actually quite jealous of my cat right now. It's like being a philosopher kind of like prevents me to have those moments all the time.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's wonderful. Thank you. I just want to, um, I wanted to share that. And I also wanted to share that they're actually quite ordinary. They need to be consistent with the way we explain these fundamental. At some point in your one of these articles that I read last night, you talk about that. Like, you don't say it this way, you say it in a really cool way, but maybe if we lose the self, we get to know more about the self. I think it's in the transparency article. And yeah, and I think that's really lovely and really beautiful. And we're going to put this section as private, because there are a lot of people who have these experiences, and they either get diagnosed or it's over spiritualized. And those people should become really good neuroscientists or neurocognitive philosophers.
Yes,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah, because
I
that experience is an important, like you're saying, and if you notice what's happening when you're running, that ordinary, profound experience is a sign to where we need to go in these questions, versus putting someone in a thing in a lab and you letting their eyes go around and saying that's the nature of perception.
Yeah. It's so going back to the changing the concept of toolbox, and the fact that I'm a female philosopher, is one of the things that I can share with you that I don't really relate with, that all this obsession with the feeling of control, understanding the control is like how I can control this. And I feel like the really important thing is how you balance out the letting go and the being in control.
Yeah,
Because we cannot control everything. We never did, we never do. And it's not because we have this like super powerful computer or super powerful minds that we'll be able one day to control it. I think that's just a dream that we have, which is
yeah,
probably a coping mechanism for something else, which I'm not going to discuss here today. But I think this importance of, as you said, it's like sometimes we just need to let go.
yeah.
And
And the curiosity kicks in,
yeah,
right? So it's
yeah,
not just passive. You let go and
yeah,
then, oh, I
yeah.
didn't know
Yes.
it worked that way. You
And
know,
I
this is
think it's
interesting.
coming from this idea that, you know, it's like, I need to understand, I need to know, I need to, and I need to control everything. And the more I know, and going back, my favorite metaphors is about food, because I said I'm from Burgundy. I said, I'm saying to my friends, well, if you eat fast and a lot, it doesn't mean that you eat better. You know,
Yeah,
it's, you really need to eat a certain amount of food that you need a certain type of the day, where it's like depending on where you are and what you did and during the day. It's like a fine-grained mechanism. It's a constant negotiation, constant exchange, which involves necessarily the letting go part.
yeah. And you know, this is something I can hear you would say, but I truly believe that eating was meant to be done with other people.
Mm, mm, mm,
I mean, there's no comparison. I mean, every once in a while you want to sit and have like comfort food or something, but in general, I think that again is one of these relational separations,
mm.
and it makes a difference on how we metabolize food. So, yeah,
Yeah.
we should start a food channel next time.
The sharing part is happening. The most important conversation at conferences, I had them over food.
Yes, yes,
When while sitting while eating, and then you know, the ideas which you keep nourishing and fluttering, but
yes,
literally. Yeah, well, actually kind of makes sense. If you go back to the animal, food is energy. So food
yeah,
are the things that you put in. So when you share food, you share the very fact of getting energy in.
yeah,
And I think that's basic and super important, super beautiful.
yeah. Okay, well, I have energy now, and thank you so much
Thank
for
you. Thank you
spending
for the
this time
invitation
with us.
and for a
Zach,
very nice discussion.